So what we're going to do is we're going to sew on this little piece of fabric that's been given to you. This fabric is called a swatch, which is just something that you use to test your stitches and your machine when you're getting ready to sew. So for those of you who drive, this was on the ground. This is your foot pedal. Same thing like you have when you drive. For those of you who don't drive, I'm sure you've seen someone press the foot pedal on a car. And what happens when you press the foot pedal on a car is the same thing that happens when you press the foot pedal on the sewing machine. When you press the foot pedal, the machine starts to sew. Like I was saying, when you push the foot pedal with your foot, I'm just demonstrating so that you can see, but you will be pushing this with your foot. It's just like with a car. When you press it lightly, the car goes slow and the machine goes slow. When you press it hard, the machine goes hard, just like your car goes fast. So I'm going to put this on the ground now because we're going to be using this with our foot. On these machines, when you're getting ready to sew, make sure that this dial is at a 9 or a 10, and this dial is near somewhere between a 3 and a 4, or at a 3 or a 4. Okay, so to start, you have to start sewing. These two threads should be towards the back of the machine. Start getting ready to sew. Make sure, like I said, that the bubble is at the top on the hand wheel, that this bubble is at the top. Okay, that raises your needle to the highest point, so that you can get your fabric under. Now, when getting ready to sew, you will start your line of stitching. Always put the fabric so that most of the fabric is to the left, off the machine. You want to start sewing that way. So if you have two seams, you don't want to start like this with all the fabric inside the arm of the machine. You want to start with the fabric outside of the machine on the left here. So we're going to start sewing, and one thing I can tell you, we're going to sew a line of stitching down here where we've marked. Okay, we're going to put a line of stitching right down there. When you start stitching, you want to put the pressure foot down with the pressure foot lever like we talked about. Okay, so you're going to start, you want to put the fabric in the machine so that it looks like the needle is lining up with whatever the line is you drew. So once you start a seam, you press the foot pedal, the machine starts to go, and then after about 3 stitches, this toggle switch, if you hold it down, it will make the machine go in reverse. So you want to, when you start a seam, you want to sew 3 or 4 inches forward, hold this down, go 3 or 4 stitches back, then release it and continue going forward with your stitching. When you get to the end of the line of stitching, you want to do the same thing. You want to hold down this toggle switch, the reverse switch. You go backwards a little bit, release it, and then go sew off the fabric. Okay, so now I've stopped sewing. The bubble is not at the top of my machine. So I take my hand and I turn it until the bubble is aligned with the top of the machine. When I do that, that raises the needle to its highest point, which is what I want. I want the needle to be at its highest point. I lift up the pressure foot and I pull out my fabric. On this right here on the machine is a little cutter. So I take the 2 threads, I put them over the cutter, and it cuts them. And I take the threads and put them towards the back of the machine. The reason why I told you to sew a few stitches, hold down this reverse toggle switch, go backwards, and then go forwards to the end of your stitching, the end of the seam you want to create, is because if you don't, your stitches can pull out. That's why this is called locking the stitches, when you go forward and then back a few stitches and then forward all the way. It's very important so your stitches don't come apart from the garment or item that you're sewing. So we're going to sew another line of stitching. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to turn a corner, because I'm going to show you how to turn a corner while sewing. Slide your fabric under the pressure foot, put the pressure foot down, start sewing, and then back up a few stitches by holding down this reverse toggle, let it go, and then go all the way down. So all the way down. Right here, I have marked that I want to turn a corner and then go up the other side. In order to do that, you go down to the point at which you want to turn, and you want to stop so that your needle is down inside the fabric. You lift the pressure foot and you turn. I'm not quite there. So I'm going to do a couple of more stitches. Okay. I lift the pressure foot. My needle is inside the fabric. I lift the pressure foot. I turn the fabric. Put the pressure foot back down and then sew to the next point that I want to turn. We keep the needle in the fabric so that we don't lose our place. So the needle's in the fabric. If when you stop you're not quite there, just use the hand wheel to turn it so that you're in the fabric. I lift the pressure foot, I turn the fabric, I put the pressure foot back down, and I continue sewing. I come to another point where I want to turn. It's not quite, the machine's not quite where I want it to be, so I moved it with my hand rail. I open, I lift the pressure foot lifter, I turn my fabric, put it back down, sew to where I want to turn again, make sure my needle's down in the fabric, lift up the pressure foot lever, turn the fabric, go down and continue sewing. When I get to the end of all of this and I want to stop, I want to come off the fabric, no more corners, I sew almost to the end, hit the reverse toggle, go back a couple of stitches, and then let it go and sew off the fabric. Okay. The goal is to sew as close to the lines that you have marked as possible. You can see here, I'm pretty close to the lines. I'm not always on it. As long as you're close, you're good. Okay.